What's up, guys? DJ here with Flint Fishing. Out here working on the boat, rigging up some tackle, and figured I'd walk you through my little project here. This week we broke a rod tip off one of my brother's rods. So we're going to try and fix it here. Here's the end of it. And I've done this before on a couple different rods. Replaced some of the line guides here down a little bit lower. Fixed a couple rod tips before, so I'm going to go through the same process that I always use, and hopefully it works on this rod. I don't know, different rod makers use different products, but most of the time, every other rod that I've fixed, this has worked, so we're going to go with it. The tools that you're going to need, some epoxy, just some 2-part epoxy is what I use. A couple different random pliers, snips, some vice grips help. A little plastic cup or something to mix up the epoxy in. Cheap little throwaway paintbrush from Harbor Freight. And what else? Oh, a lighter. I'll show you what that's used for. And probably smart when you're working with the epoxy to wear a glove and have some paper towels around. So we'll go through that and let's get into it. So first thing that you want to do is you take your rod tip. You can see where it's snapped there. And I'm going to take the vice grips and just clamp it right onto the blank that's left on there. If you can see that there. And I'm going to take some heat and apply it to it. A lot of times this glue will heat up and burn right off. And so then once I get enough heat on there, I'm going to pull on the actual rod guide. And that piece of the blank that's left in there should come out. So we'll see how that works. Once you start to see it catching on fire like that, normally you can start pulling on it. My vice grips are a little too loose there. So we're going to re-clamp on there. All right, and you might want to have the second pair of pliers to be able to pull on the rod guide because it is metal, so it heats up. Get a little bit hotter this time. Well, normally that heats up and pulls right out, but they kind of have a little different system on this rod guide here. So you can see on that tip, the little support braces that go up are kind of separate from the actual insert of where the rod inserts into the tip. So I'm going to have to look at that and figure that out, but I think it should just pull out with enough heat here. So we'll try that again and see what we get. Other things, make sure you're in a well-ventilated area. Out here in the garage, it works pretty good because there's some nasty stuff that comes off these. So that one just took a lot more heat than usual, but that glue was up in there good. So just like that, I pulled out the rod, the piece of the rod that's broken off in there, and now I got the guide and I can reuse that. I don't know if you can see that very well. All right, so now to size it up and see if we can get it to fit onto the rod. It's hot out today. So that's going to go on perfect. One thing you can do if your the rod tip where it broke off is kind of jacked up, you can clean that off and cut that off. This one broke literally right at the tip, right at the guide. So there's plenty of blank left to add it onto, and it's a pretty clean break. So we should be able to just stick this right on. I don't even need to, but you can sand it down a little bit and clean it up. But this one's not even going to need it. It's going to fit perfect. So we can size it up like that. It's going to go right on there. And then this part I'm going to have to probably epoxy it on first just to get it to stick, and then I'll epoxy that down and I'll clamp that down. It's a little bit different rod tip on this one. Probably a good measure to clean up the rod tip before you glue it on there. Alright, so now we're going to take our 2-part epoxy, throw my glove on here. It's also probably a lot easier to do with 2 hands instead of just one, but we'll make it work. And with epoxy, you want to make sure you get nice even between the two, the hardener and then the actual resin, I think it is. But if I had 2 hands, I'd show you how I did that. But you just want to do a nice little squirt of both of those and get a nice even amount of both. And then once you get it in there, you're just going to mix it up. You're going to want to mix it up for a couple minutes. Make sure it's thoroughly mixed, because otherwise it won't set up right, and it'll might just stay too sticky the whole time and it won't ever fully harden. All right, that's pretty mixed up. So now I'm just going to resize this one more time. Make sure we're good. And then once we get it on there, I'm going to spin the rod a little bit to make sure that that epoxy doesn't just drip down and stay in one spot. So if you kind of spin the rod for a couple minutes while it's setting up, that'll help it so it doesn't just drip off. All right, so we're just going to paint this on. Get some on your paintbrush and just kind of paint it on there. And this ain't a professional job here. This is just to get you back fishing. After that's painted on there, you can put a little bit down inside the cup there of the tip and get that epoxy down in there. Then we're going to slide it on. And then it kind of pushes all the epoxy down towards the end. I'm not sure if you can see that. But I like to take the paintbrush, smooth it out a little bit again. And I think what we're going to try and do here is push that rod, that little guide, how it's separated there. We're going to try and push it down at the same time as this cures. Make sure you get it lined up nice and straight with the rest of the rod guides. Looks pretty good to me. Alright, actually I lied. The way that rod guide's separated, I'm going to wait to fix that till after the end. I'm going to let it set up on the tube with the epoxy, and then I'll go back and fix that. So now we're just going to kind of spin that rod, let that epoxy cure. This is the fast, I think 5 minutes, sets in 5 minutes, so wouldn't hurt if I could get it stuff that's set a little bit quicker, but 5 minutes is pretty good. It sets up pretty fast, and then I think it cures in 24 hours, so you could be on the water the next day. Alright guys, so we've let that spin for a while. I spun it for about 5 minutes or so, and that's setting up pretty good now. It's staying in the right spot. It's exactly where I want it. And like I was saying, this is kind of a different rod tip here. You can see how that separates. The little supports separate right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let this set up overnight, and then I'm going to take some old braided line. I always keep, even if there's a little bit left on the spools, I always keep it. So I'm going to take a little bit of braided line left, and tomorrow I'm going to wrap all around that separation there, the little supports, and tie it down tight, and then I'll coat it again with epoxy, give it another little coat to hold that in place, and then that thing will not be going anywhere. So I will let this dry overnight, and I will see you tomorrow.